Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to get started with this webinar momentarily. Just going to get it set up here on Facebook Live. So if you'd like to watch on Facebook, please feel free to visit the NAMI Texas Facebook page because it is now live there. In the meantime, we're going to kick things off with some brief introductory comments by me, and then I'll turn it over to our esteemed presenter, Jordan Smelly. Jordan will be speaking with us today about self-advocacy within the college environment and the workforce. I'd like to thank our sponsors of this webinar and the upcoming NAMI Texas webinars. Particularly, I'd like to thank the Hogg Foundation for Mental Health, Methodist Healthcare Ministries of South Texas, AbbVie, Otsuka, Neurocrine Biosciences, Pharma, and Cedar Crest Behavioral Healthcare System. Thank you so much to our sponsors for making this webinar possible for us. And this isn't the only webinar we've been doing. We've had several webinars in the last month or so. We've been doing just about one webinar a week. There is another upcoming webinar on the schedule. This one is on the evening before Veterans Day, and we'll be hearing from U.S. Army veteran Ben Beck, and he'll be talking about bipolar disorder and his experience in the U.S. military and his experience addressing and living with bipolar disorder and now experiencing recovery. It should be really interesting, and we're looking forward to this event. If you're interested in joining, please visit namitexas.org/webinars to register for it today. It's on Tuesday, November 10th at 6 p.m. Central. I'd also like to encourage you to attend our upcoming event on November 7th. This event and all of the webinars are available for free at no cost to the participants. The November 7th event consists of several different parts, including presentation of our annual awards. You can see on the screen, we're giving out 8 different awards at this event. So please come and honor our awardees, who are an amazing group of people who do so much for the state of Texas and for their communities. We'll also be hearing from the president and CEO of Haven for Hope in San Antonio. We'll be learning about their programs and the profound difference that they're making in the lives of people experiencing chronic homelessness in the San Antonio area. We'll also be covering the NAMI Texas annual business meeting, talking about the state of NAMI Texas, announcing the results of the ongoing NAMI Texas election. So please join us for that. And then lastly, at 11:35 on November 7th, we'll be giving a public policy update to get everyone up to speed on what NAMI Texas will be advocating for in the upcoming Texas legislative session. You can join for part of this or all of it. Find more information at namitexas.org, and right there on the homepage, you'll be provided with information about how to register for our November 7th event. And actually, before I introduce our presenter, I'd like to give some instructions on how to participate in today's webinar. If you have any questions, please enter those into the Q&A box here on Zoom. Jordan will be addressing the questions that come in at the end of his presentation. After the webinar, you'll be asked to fill out a feedback survey. It'll just pop up on your screen when you close out the webinar, or if you prefer, you can fill out the survey by email. There will be a link that is emailed to you through Zoom. We really appreciate any feedback on today's event so that we can use that to improve our events going forward, and so that we can know what is working and what isn't working about our webinars. I also would like to note that today's webinar is being recorded. We'll post the recording on namitexas.org/webinars as soon as it's available. If for whatever reason you have any trouble tracking down the recording, please email me, Greg Hansch. I'm the Executive Director of NAMI Texas, and you can reach me at executive.director@namitexas.org, or feel free to give me a call. Jordan will be covering a lot of ground in a short period of time, so we know that it might be valuable for you to have the recording. Now, without any further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce our presenter today. Our presenter is Jordan Smelly. Jordan is a peer recovery support specialist. He uses his lived experience with intellectual and developmental disabilities and co-occurring mental health diagnoses due to Chung-Jansen syndrome to support and provide resources to others so that they don't have to go through as much trauma as Jordan did in order to be able to get the supports and resources needed to become a contributing member of the community at large. Jordan Smelly has obtained the Transitional Age Youth Endorsement for his Peer Recovery Support Specialist certification. He serves on the Texas HHSC Behavioral Health Advisory Committee as a representative for youth and young adults. And personally, just watching the proceedings of the Behavioral Health Advisory Committee, Jordan does an amazing job representing youth and young adults on the Behavioral Health Advisory Committee. It is an incredibly strong and well-informed voice that really provides a lot of value and insight into the conversations on the premier Behavioral Health Advisory Committee for the state of Texas. Jordan also is the only known case of Chung-Jansen syndrome within the state of Texas, and is one of roughly 92 known cases of Chung-Jansen syndrome worldwide. In his free time, Jordan enjoys playing piano, volleyball, officiating volleyball for the Texas Special Olympics, and hanging out with friends. Jordan, thank you so much for being here today. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Greg. Screen share here. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about self-advocacy within the college academic environment and the workforce environment. And my work email is down here. So, you know, if I don't happen to get to your question or you have one after today, there's a way to reach me. So the first thing you gotta understand about self-advocacy, and I'm sure this is a phrase many of you have heard within many different settings, but it's nothing about us without us. So it's really important to understand that you are the best expert on yourself, as well as what needs you have in order to have your needs met. So that being said, advocating within the college educational system. So when we talk about advocating within the college educational system, you need to be able to explain what supports you need with instructors and disability support services. I know some colleges call it disability support services. Some colleges might have a different name, but it's the office that you go to in order to provide them medical documentation showing that you need accommodations and supports, and then it's their job to kind of help figure out what it is exactly you can get, as well as creating the documentation that you would hand to your instructors so that they understand that you have supports that you need. And this is kind of a way of doing it to where, you know, it's not like everyone in the whole wide world or in your class knows that you have a disability. It's a way for you to notify your instructors quietly, because typically it's a form and you hand it to them and it lists everything on there for you. You need to know where disability support services is located. Some colleges will have a different name for this office, but you really need to know where this office is located, because they are the ones that will help you if you're having issues with your professors and being provided the supports that you qualify for. Know where a counselor's office is located. And the reason this is important is because disability support services, they're more for helping figure out what supports or accommodations you qualify for, but they won't always happen to know maybe the best professor for a certain subject for that you need to take. And in my lived experience, when I went to college, it was speaking with the counselors that helped me get the professor that would be most beneficial for me and would understand my support need and be willing to work with me. Because I did have a few times in college where before I kind of talked to counselors, I just kind of picked out of those listed. And there were a few times that it was not a very good fit. And it led to some issues. Know your rights and don't be afraid to speak up if you feel your rights have been violated. Hence why it's important to know where disability support services is located. Those of us with disabilities, we have rights. One of those rights being that your professor cannot disclose to the whole class that you have accommodations. I actually had this happen to me in an English class. I had a professor who was old school and more believed in you shall write papers in pen and pencil. And we happened to be in the computer room, and my accommodation was being able to use the computer to write my papers because I have a disability. It's harder for me to write pen and paper than it is for me to be able like type a paper. There's just issues with thoughts going from the brain to my hand and write, whereas it's easier going from my brain and then typing. And what happened was that professor ended up telling the whole class that I would be able to use a computer and no one else would because I had a disability. And that's kind of why it's so important to know where disability support services is, because they are the office that will handle complaints if you feel your rights have been violated. All right, so going forward. Potential classroom adjustments. I did pull a majority of the information from Boston University College of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences, Sargent College Center for Psychiatric Rehabilitation. And at the beginning of this, of their article, they state that uh, different supports will be needed for different people. So it's kind of like, although they've listed some information, some people may qualify for some of these, and while others qualify for others. And so it's kind of not like these are your only options, because it just really depends on the individual's need as well as the medical documentation that is submitted. So one potential classroom adjustment is preferential seating. Seating in front by the door. It can help reduce audio-visual distractions. I actually had this accommodation for my classes. Being able to sit in the front, one, because I wear glasses, and two, pardon me, because I have ADHD. Being able to sit at the very front of the classroom, it made sure that I'd be able to see any kind of PowerPoint or video that my professor used during lecture, as well as it's less distracting because in college, not everyone is on time to class. So when I'm sitting at the front of the classroom, people entering late or maybe getting up to use the bathroom or anything like that, it was less distracting to me. This could also be an accommodation for someone with maybe like diabetes, where you might need to leave class to go inject medicine or check your blood sugar level, and being able to sit by the door would be could be a reasonable accommodation, because it would allow you to the support you needed to be able to do whatever it is you need to manage your medical condition. Coach or mentor, or coach/mentor. Having someone, another student, for example, accompany a student to class and or stay in class with the student. This is one that I did not know about when I went to college, but I've seen it. I had a classmate who was deaf, and they actually had an interpreter with them. And so that's kind of having the support. It's basically being able, sometimes people just need that little extra support in order to be able to have a level playing field within the class. Assign classmate as volunteer assistant. Similar to an accompanier, a volunteer assistant may help take notes or provide informal support. This is one that I kind of had, in the sense that I had a note taker in some of my classes, and they helped with taking notes so that I would still do what I could, but then I wouldn't have to worry about as much or have anxiety about having very important information written down. Beverages permitted in class. Helps alleviate dry mouth or tiredness caused by medications. This is another accommodation I had back when I attended college. I was able to have, and typically with this accommodation, it's water that is allowed unless you have a medical reason for having something other than water with you. but that is something that you can have. But I also, through my college experience, I had those professors that were like, I don't care if you bring a drink to class so long as you don't spill it, or if you do spill it, you clean up your own mess. So it's kind of one of those that I had it in case I had a professor that was like, no drink, but then I could have water with me, just so I don't have a dry mouth. Potential lecture accommodations. So we've gone from the classroom environment, and now we're talking about accommodations like during your class, during the lecture. Prearranged breaks help students anticipate and manage anxiety, stress, or extreme restlessness caused by medication. This is one I didn't really know about back when I went through college, um, but I can see the usefulness for this one, especially if you have anxiety, because it's like if you have a really long class, just knowing, because some professors, and I never had any, but I have heard back when I went to college of professors that were like, once you walk in that door, if you go out, you cannot come back in. They expected you to stay for the whole class. And this is one where, it'd be helpful for someone with anxiety if they ended up having a professor like that, to where they kind of, privately work out, okay, how long can you manage being in class before you need a break? Because depending on the class, for example, I took anatomy and physiology, and for the lab that met once a week, that was a 2-hour class. Having a break within that 2 hours would have been helpful for me. So I kind of wish I knew about this one, but that's kind of the thing. It's for those classes that, that kind of meet longer than other classes, and someone that just, deals with anxiety or other issues, being able to know that they can take a break after X amount of time will help them feel more comfortable being in the class, and would actually help them be able to focus better, because they know that they aren't going to have to worry about whether or not they're going to be able to handle class, because they know themselves enough to know that, okay, I can handle class for X amount of time. So for example, for me, if I would have had this during my extremely long lab class, for me, I would have needed a break about halfway, the 10, 15-minute break about halfway in the class. So about an hour, and then have about a 10, 15-minute break where I'm kind of away from everyone and I can just take a deep breath and recenter. For me, to recenter usually involves music or some deep breathing. But this is one of those where it helps people be able to attend class that are longer and know that they'll get the support they need in order to attend. Audio recorder alleviates pressure of note-taking, freeing the student to attend and participate more fully in class. I had this accommodation when I was in college. It helped a lot, and I actually once I learned about this accommodation, I kind of went away from the note taker, because the issue is when you have a note taker, you're depending on someone to show up. And there were instances where my note taker was not showing up. Therefore, I was missing out on important notes. So, having the audio recorder, it really helped, because I know I could record the lecture and then I could go back when I get home and I could take any notes or write down anything that I felt was important that I might have missed during class. The only thing I will say with this accommodation is that if your professor goes over an exam in class and states that you have to, if you have a uh, audio recorder, you must turn it off because they reuse questions throughout the semester, then you have to turn it off. Because the point of accommodations is to give you a level playing field, not to give you an advantage. So while the audio recorder can be used during lectures, if your professor is going over an exam and specifically says, if you have an audio recorder, you cannot use it right now or turn it off, then you must comply. Otherwise, you could get in big trouble. And disability support services wouldn't be able to help you because the whole point of having an audio recorder is to help you with note taking, not to hear correct exam answers on an exam and then being able to memorize that for like the midterm or final. That would be giving you an advantage, not leveling the playing field. And the whole point about accommodations is leveling the playing field, not giving people with disabilities an advantage. Note taker. So again, we kind of briefly talked about this already. Similar to the audio recorder, having someone in class to take notes alleviates anxiety of having to capture all the information. Sometimes the anxiety of attending class interferes with effective note taking. Now, I will say, and this is from my experience of having a note taker, there are some colleges that will have funds to pay for the note taker. And so in that sense, it will be a little easier because then people know, hey, I get paid to take notes. And they would be a little more incentivized to come to class to take the notes, because if you don't show up, you don't get paid. And if you miss too many times, you can actually be fired and replaced by someone else. And the way the note taker works and worked for me, and for some people, they might do this a little different. But for me, I handed my professor my paperwork. It listed a note taker, and the way they kind of announce it without violating your rights is there's been a request for a note taker. If you are interested, please see me after class. And then when someone comes, then the professor will help connect both of you. So, but by doing that and letting the professor do it that way by making an announcement and then connecting someone with you, you kind of give them the permission to share who the note taker request is from. Other colleges, you don't get paid, which is where it kind of runs into a bigger issue because it's like you're just volunteering your time. And so people don't have the same motivation level as those that note takers that do get paid. Also understand that if you are someone with a disability with the note taker accommodation, if your note taker is not just, they're just not working out, you do have the right to go to disability support services and explain to them that it's just not working out with this person and that you need a new note taker. And then they will help you facilitate that process, or they will reach out to you, or they'll tell you to go to your professor after you've let them know and let your professor know that it's not working out, so that he or she knows maybe someone else that was interested, and give them the opportunity. Using another student's notes. If note takers are not available, then securing notes from another student helps free him or her to attend and participate more fully in class. The way that I have seen this one work, I didn't have this particular one because I either had the audio recorder or I had the note taker. But the way I have seen this one work is someone from the professor makes the announcement, that someone um, needs assistance with note taking, and then and if you're willing to provide your notes to someone, then he would tell them to go to disability support office and let them know which class you're in, because disability support services will have a copy of your schedule. And then what they do is they go to disability support services, and then disability support services allows the classmate willing to provide a copy of their notes, allows them to use their copy machine, and then they make a copy of the notes. The only thing to be aware of with this one is you're kind of relying on that the person that's willing to volunteer and take the time to Xerox copy their notes has handwriting that you can read. So just keep that in mind. It's not a bad accommodation for some people, but at the same time, when you're getting a copy of someone's notes, and when you have a note taker, you're kind of relying on them to have a handwriting style that you can read, versus with the audio recorder, you can just set it down in class, turn it on, let it record everything, take as many notes as you can, knowing that you turn it off at the end of class, and then when you get home, you just hit play, and then you fill in any blanks that you missed. So you're not really relying on having someone's notes in a handwriting that you can read. Because that was another issue I ran into when having a note taker. Sometimes it wasn't that they didn't show up, it was I just can't read their handwriting. So something to consider. All right, so we've talked about the classroom environment accommodations, potential classroom environment accommodations, potential lecture accommodations. Now we're going to talk about potential examination accommodations. Change in test format. Altering an exam from a multiple choice format to an essay format may help students demonstrate their knowledge more effectively and with much less interference from anxiety or a learning disability. I like the way they wrote this. However, for me, it was a little different. Instead, for example, I took a computer class, and every so often my professor did a pop quiz and had people write down whatever the answer was to the questions they asked, or a summary of the lesson that was taught that day. And what my professor would do in the computer class is they would actually pull me aside outside, and then they would have me verbally give a summary of what we covered. Because they know I have the disability with being able to process and getting what I learned or what was covered from thought to pen and paper. And it's easier for me to be able to speak what I learned or what was covered. And so that was the change in the format. I've also had it where, and I don't know if we cover it, so let me go to the next bullet. Permit use of technological assistance. Writing may be difficult due to medication side effects that create muscular or visual problems. Using a variety of tech support or devices can be helpful. So this is kind of talking about, for example, the accommodation I had in English class, where I could type my papers instead of having to handwrite them. And you know, there are some people where it's not just the issues muscularly or visually. It could be that someone has a processing issue, or a learning issue. And that's where, you know, technology can be an assistance. Extended time. Allowing extra time for exams to be negotiated before the exam allows the student to focus on the exam content instead of the clock and lessen the chance that anxiety or other symptoms will interfere with his or her performance. I had this accommodation when I was in college. Um, a typical, if you wanted a typical amount that is typically approved, it's, in my experience, has been a time and a half. So if your class met for 45 minutes, then you would get 45 minutes plus, okay, let's say your class met for 60 minutes. I'm not that great with math in my head. So your class meets for 60 minutes. So on the days you have an exam, you would get a time and a half, which is the 60, and then half of what your class meets would be 30 minutes. So on exam day, you would get an hour and a half to complete the exam. Segmented, dividing an exam into parts and allowing the student to take them in 2 or 3 sessions over 1 to 2 days helps reduce the effect of fatigue and allows the student to focus on one section at a time. I sort of had this accommodation in college. Uh, what disability support services will help you with sometimes, especially if you go to their testing center. And that's another the option you have is you can have the time and a half. And for some people like me, I needed a small environment where there weren't as many people. So as few people as possible. And so most college disability support services have a testing room. And so I would go there. And to kind of get back to my point about segmented and semi having this accommodation, one thing disability support services can and did help me with is when you come to schedule final exams. I don't know if it's changed since I've been in college. I went to college from 2007 till 2013. Back when I went to college, the day and time your class met was not always the day and time of your exam. And so what disability support services can help students do sometimes is when you come to them, because you have to schedule your exam time with them, so they put you on the book, because then they request the exam from the professor, and the professor sends them the exam, and then once you take it and submit it to the staff from disability support services in the testing center, they send it back to the professor, or sometimes they'll grade it if the professor has asked them to do so and has given them the key. But what they'll do is when you schedule your final exams, if they kind of notice that you're kind of having exams back to back to back, they'll kind of help advocate for not having to do that, because taking tests all day for some people with disabilities is just unrealistic because of the fatigue. And that's kind of what this talks about, dividing an exam up into parts and allowing the student to take them in 2 or 3 sessions over 1 to 2 days to help reduce the effect of fatigue and allow the student to focus on one section at a time. In my case, it was to allow me to focus on one subject at a time. So I might have had, like, instead of having like 3 or 4 exams back to back, I would have 2 one day, and then I would have the other 2 the next day or yeah, usually the next day, if they had slots available. And that's kind of the other thing I wanted to bring up that's really important. If you're one of those that needs to take a test, and disability support services at the college you go to offers a testing center for those with disabilities, or those that get services through disability support services, you want to schedule your exam, as soon as you know the date, because they only let so many exams be scheduled within certain time periods. So it's like, yeah, we have this testing center, but it's kind of like first come, first serve. So that's why I kind of wanted to mention, if you needed to take advantage of this type of setup where you go test in a smaller area, then you're going to want to schedule it as soon as possible to make sure you're able to take your exam the day and time your class meets, if at all possible. All right, so potential examination accommodations continued. Permit exams to be individually proctored. A non-distracted, quiet setting helps reduce interference from anxiety or other symptoms or medication side effects. I had this particular accommodation when I took an anatomy and physiology. When we had our lab exam, what happened was either my professor, if they had the free time, would be in the lab with me, and it would just be me by myself, or disability support services provided one of their staff. And we scheduled it around the lab schedule, and it would just be me and either my professor or me and one staff from disability support services. And the thing that was most helpful for me about that is I could talk out loud during taking the lab exam, and that kind of helped jog my memory when I'm able to kind of like talk about things out loud, even if I'm not having a conversation with another person. Sometimes being able to just talk out loud to recall information is very helpful for me, and it helps my anxiety level not be so high when I'm taking a lab exam, because I know I'm able to kind of think out loud, and I don't have to stay quiet like I would if I was taking it with my class. Increased frequency of tests or examinations. Giving the student more opportunities to demonstrate knowledge creates less pressure than having just a midterm or a final. This wasn't one that I necessarily knew about when I was in college, but to be honest, when I went through all my classes, I didn't have a class where it was just a midterm and a final. All of my classes had at least 3 or 4 tests. But I'm sure there are probably universities, bigger universities, because I went to a community college. I went to Tarrant County Community College. So I would think, potentially the bigger universities like TCU, Texas Tech, SMU, Baylor, UT Austin, because there's a higher student to professor ratio, they might do just a midterm or just a final or just a midterm and a final. And this would kind of be the situation that this accommodation would be for. It'd be for those that, they might have anxiety, or they might have other issues that kind of could interfere with their test taking ability, and this would kind of help level the playing field for them, because it's not about, how do I put this? it's not about, it's it's more towards, it's to give them the opportunity to share to demonstrate their knowledge, kind of like it says, and for some people, having more opportunities to demonstrate their knowledge doesn't necessarily give them an advantage. In some cases, it actually does level the playing field. But again, it just really depends on the person's disabilities and what their medical documentation shows. Permit exams to be read orally, dictated, scribed, or typed. Anxiety, other symptoms, medication side effects, or a learning disability may interfere with a mental focus, concentration, ability to retrieve information, and/or writing capacity during a typical paper pencil test. Reducing the amount of external pressure and distractions gives the student an equal opportunity to demonstrate his or her expertise without the mental health conditions skewing the results. I know that was a mouthful. I can give you 2 examples of this. The first one, when I was in college, there were times when I had lengthy tests. I would be, actually on most of my tests, I was allowed to highlight my answers, and then I would go back and transcribe onto the Scantron my highlighted answer. But there were a few times where my tests were like lengthy. And so what would happen is I would go in and I would highlight my answers on the paper test, and then I would turn that in to disability support service staff in the testing center, and then they would go and transcribe my answers for me from the paper test to the Scantron. That's kind of one example of what this is talking about. Another example, I didn't really get this in college, but I actually got it on my peer recovery support specialist certification exam. I was able to, I had a time and a half, and I can't remember exactly how much time that ended up being. Um, and then I had testing by my individually, and then I had a reader. And so what that looks like is you have someone, and it can, and in college it would more than likely be disability support staff or potentially your professor. But they would sit down with you, and they would sit down with you and more than likely have a copy of the test, and then they would read each question and, if need be, each answer choice. And that's what I had when I was working on my peer recovery support specialist certification exam. I had a reader. My test was actually on the computer. So I had a reader sitting next to me, and he read each question and then each answer choice. And then I selected my answer, and then we went to the next question. And that's kind of another example of what this particular set of information is talking about. All right, so now we're moving to potential assignment accommodations. All right, so one potential assignment accommodation is substitute assignment. Other exercises may be considered for a student with a psychiatric or mental health condition to best demonstrate their grasp of the required knowledge. This kind of goes back to the example I talked about earlier with my computer professor. They understood that pen and paper is not the best way for me to demonstrate my knowledge. And so instead of doing it that way, they did it this way. I had another professor where I actually was in an intensive outpatient program during his class. And I reached out to him because this was my last semester of college and I just needed his class and one other class that was in the evening and was after I got out of the intensive outpatient program. And so I called him and I explained to him the situation and I was like, I already have, it was for creating different kind of musical tracks, um, uh, or recordings. And so I talked to him and I explained to him, I already have music editing software. And I have one of the softwares that he uses in his class. And I asked him, I explained to him, look, I'm getting mental health help during your class. And your class and the one that I have at night are the only two that are keeping me from finishing my certification. Because I also have a certification in audio production. And so I talked to him and I was like, can I just create things and use the software that y'all use in class and then use the other software I have and just submit a track to you on a weekly basis and then that be what you grade in order to give me a grade so that I'm not having to come back another semester to take your class because we already had to talk to the director of this program to get them to put me in his class because I was in the beginner version and I needed the advanced. And the advanced version doesn't ever meet because not enough people sign up. So he said, yeah, no problem. Just send me a track, at least one track once a week, and that's how I ended up passing his class. Instead of actually being there and him working with me or giving me an assignment, he allowed me to create stuff and send it to him. Advance notice of assignments helps a student anticipate and plan time, energy, and workload and arrange for any support or academic adjustments. Um, this is one that I never really needed in college because all of my professors gave us a syllabus on the first day. And that syllabus listed all the assignments and their due dates. So this would probably be one that's for those with a disability that need a heads up and an advance notice of assignments, but the professor does not provide a syllabus on the first day of class that has every single assignment listed as well as the due date for said assignment. Delay and assignment due dates. Extra time on a due date might be all that is needed for a student to pass a course. The delay should be specified, i.e., a new due date should be negotiated and formalized, not left to be open. Uh, I kind of had this a little bit because throughout my college career, I had some times where I needed extra help with my mental health and being able to um, given a little more time to complete things while I was seeking treatment was very beneficial. Or there was one time that I actually ended up being sick on the day of my scheduled final. And instead of my professor flunking me, um, they allowed me another chance to take the exam when I was better, so that because I was gonna pass the class had I taken the exam. There was no, even if you made 100 on this test, you're not gonna pass the class. It was so long as I took the exam, I would pass the class. And so, we got together, and if I remember correctly, it was about a week after the date of the final was when I took mine. And then, of course, I was given credit for the class because I passed. Assignment assistance during periods of difficulty. Staying connected to a student while he or she is experiencing difficulty coming to classes may mean the student can finish the course as planned and not have to take an incomplete or withdrawal grade, lose their money, or repeat the course again. The exacerbation of symptoms does not necessarily preclude the student's ability to complete schoolwork, and in some cases may help them meet their academic responsibilities. So this one kind of goes back to the example I was talking about with substitute assignments with the professor that I reached out to and allowed me to submit a track every week to be graded, because I was no way I was going to make class, because I was in an intensive outpatient program the whole time the class met. So there was no way for me to make it. And so, so yes, technically I was experiencing difficulty coming to classes, but I was at the point where I knew mentally and physically that if he would let me create my own tracks and submit them, that I would be able to complete the class without having to get a withdrawal and then have to go through the process of speaking with the program director again, and then have to disclose to them about my mental health issues just to be granted the petition to be put back into the beginner's class. So this was very helpful. Having assignment assistance while I was in intensive outpatient. I also spoke with the professor I had in the evening to let him know what's going on, and that, I'll be coming to class, but there might just be some days that I'm so mentally exhausted that I may not be able to stay the whole time. And my professor was very understanding and was like, do your best to come. And if you have to leave early, we'll connect and catch you up on what you missed. So assignment assistance during periods of difficulty is definitely one of those accommodations, even though I didn't know that's what it was called at the time, and it wasn't necessarily on my paperwork. I just had awesome professors that were willing to do this. So to kind of see that it is a potential assignment accommodation is pretty cool, to be honest. I just kind of got lucky in the sense I had two professors willing to do this, even though it wasn't in my paperwork. Use alternative forms. Potential assignment accommodations continued. Use alternative forms for students to demonstrate course mastery. A student may be better able to demonstrate his or her knowledge in ways that don't require lots of writing. Example, a narrative audio tape instead of a written journal. Or time pressure, an essay exam rather than only multiple choice, or an extra paper if the student has not performed well on the exam due to his or her symptoms. We've kind of already gone over this and other examples, so I'll touch on it a little bit and then move on. So again, it's an opportunity to be able to allow students with disabilities to demonstrate course mastery. So like my computer professor pulling me outside and allowing me to verbally express what we covered and or what I learned. The being able to submit a track to my professor once a week for my grade to demonstrate my knowledge and course mastery. Textbooks on tape. Textbooks on tape may help a student whose vision or concentration interferes with their reading ability. I had this one, accommodation, in college. I also had it in high school. And I can say, you know, being able to know that it was helpful to have textbooks or maybe a book that we're reading in class on tape. So then I can listen and follow along. And that being able to listen and follow along as it's read was very beneficial for me. And being that it's on tape, you know, if I kind of didn't catch something or if I just kind of lost my concentration, I can just rewind and listen to it again. Whereas, you know, if you just had the book in class and you missed something or didn't understand something, too bad, so sad, you don't typically get the chance to have someone go back and reread something. It's just not something that I have seen done where in class someone reads something and then you kind of miss something and then you get the opportunity for that person to read it again. So that's where textbooks on tape would come in handy because it allows you the opportunity to, if you missed something or didn't quite understand or needed to hear it again, you can just rewind and listen as many times as you needed. And then you wouldn't, and for some people, that's very beneficial because for some people with disabilities, asking for help is embarrassing. And that's kind of one thing I hope y'all take away from today is that it is okay to ask for help. Because otherwise, how else are you going to be successful if you don't get the supports you need in order to be successful? So textbooks on tape was very beneficial for me. All right, so now we're moving to potential administrative accommodations. Providing modifications, substitutions, or waivers of courses, majors, fields of study, or degree requirements on a case-by-case basis. These adjustments should be considered on an individual basis and only if the changes requested would not substantially alter essential elements of the course or program, or if courses are required for licensure. I had this one back in college. So again, kind of talking about being able to be put in the advanced class of a particular course, but being in the beginner's class because the advanced class never makes. There was also a course within my certification for audio production that the radio and TV broadcasting department didn't offer anymore. And in that case, what I had to do was I had to go talk with the department head for radio TV broadcasting, ask them how come I don't ever see this course. And that's when I was notified that they don't offer it anymore. And so then we initiated the required paperwork for a waiver of that particular course because they don't offer it anymore and they hadn't updated the certification degree plan or requirement plan and to reflect that course no longer being offered. But again, this is on a case-by-case basis. And so this is kind of why it's so important for you to advocate for yourself because you're not gonna get modifications, substitutions, or waiver of courses. Those are all things that require you to speak up for yourself. Provide orientation to campus and administrative procedures, increasing a student's familiarity with an environment and the system to help him or her to feel more confident and allow the students to plan, strategize, and anticipate trouble spots and know where to go for assistance. Most colleges offer a freshman orientation. This could, but I don't really have experience with this one. I'll just be honest. The way I could see this one potentially being implemented is maybe having a personal orientation where it's just you and someone that works for the college, going through the whole campus and orienting you to where things are located, or maybe a smaller group. So that way it's not so overwhelming for people that might have anxiety uh, about being in larger groups. Provide assistance with registration financial aid, helping a student cut through red tape and coaching them through the intricate but critical process of financial aid eliminates a potentially debilitating amount of stress and hassle. I didn't have this one, um, and I could be wrong, but back when I went to college, and things I've heard from classmates, most financial aid offices assist people if they ask for it. So again, self-advocating for help. So, and that's kind of, you in college, you gotta ask for help, because that's kind of what they expect you to advocate for yourself, because most of the time you're an adult by the time you go to college, and so adults advocate for their needs and supports. The assistance with registration, that kind of goes back to me talking about having someone within the counselor's office, one of the counselors, helping me pick an instructor who would best fit my needs. Now, the thing that they can't do is say, you need to take that class with this professor, because there's conflict of interest. What they do is they say, I would highly suggest you take that particular class with this professor, because they're not telling you who to choose. They're just informing you of an option that they felt would be helpful. Flexibility in determining full-time status for purposes of financial aid and health insurance. A school often has the power to declare a student full-time even if he or she is part-time. Excuse me. If the psychiatric condition is such that a part-time load is equal in burden to a full-time load for a student without a disability, such a case can be made. I didn't know about this back when I went to college, and I wish I had, because being overwhelmed was one of the major contributions to me having so many mental health issues while in college, because it was like I was expected to take a full-time course load, and I didn't know I had the option of trying to be considered full-time with a part-time load. But I kind of disagree with the way this is worded a little bit, in the sense that for me, the way that I would qualify for this particular accommodation is not because of this psychiatric conditions I have due to Chung-Jansen syndrome. It would be because of the issues I have with how glucose is transported and absorbed throughout my body. So I fatigue a lot easier than someone without a disability because I have issues with how glucose is transported and absorbed in my body. I don't have diabetes though, but I still have issues, and because of that, but I would think, and I would like be 99% sure I would qualify for this, and if not, it would be the issues with how glucose is transported and absorbed, as well as my mental health diagnoses that would qualify me for this. And the reason I kind of disagree with the way this is worded is because the way it's worded, it could be, in my opinion, misinterpreted and therefore exclude those people that would otherwise be eligible for this accommodation, because they would qualify because of their situation with their medical conditions, and there are some that would qualify, but it would be because of psychiatric, and it's like they're specifically listing psychiatric condition, and that's kind of where I disagree, just simply because there are other medical issues out there that would that people would become eligible for this accommodation, but yet they're trying to limit it to a psychiatric condition. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on how that is worded. Potential administrative accommodations continue. Assistance with selecting classes and course loads. Early morning classes or high stress classes could set a student up for failure. I had that issue in college. I made the poor decision to take anatomy and physiology my very first semester of college, and that was a very high stress class for me, and to be honest, led to my first inpatient treatment for mental health. Just because the class was so high stress and no one kind of really took the time to sit down with me, talk with me, and figure out which classes would be good for me to take during my first semester. Parking passes, elevator key, access to a lounge. Anxiety and other psychiatric symptoms can physically and emotionally prevent a student from crossing the campus or climb several sets of stairs or sustaining energy for a day of classes when they would otherwise be capable of attending class. These supports make the environment more accessible and friendly, and are usually cheap and easy to obtain. Um, didn't really have this accommodation unless you kind of count getting a handicap placard, and therefore I had more parking options, because I also wear leg braces. So walking long distances for me is difficult. So is uh, climbing several flights of stairs. But I never had a class on a second level or higher. All my classes, I was fortunate, I suppose, that all my classes were on the first floor of any building. Um, but I have seen, and through my college career, people using not necessarily a elevator key, but having some kind of note or documentation on them in case a staff member were to stop them. And then I haven't really heard about access to a lounge. So my thoughts would be this would be somewhere for someone to go and just kind of uh, ground themselves, kind of like quiet place where they can kind of refocus. Incompletes rather than failures or withdrawals if relapse occurs. If a student has finished most of the coursework but is unable to complete the remainder before the semester's end, negotiating an incomplete can be beneficial because it may mean that student will not have to repay or retake the entire course in order to finish it. This is one that I didn't really have, but I have heard of it. And from my understanding, the way an incomplete works is if you miss the end of the semester because of medical reasons, then you can request an incomplete and then start at the beginning of the next semester. You have X amount of days to complete the work you missed. And then by the time if you complete the work within the window of time you're given and you earn a passing grade, then you pass. Identify a place to meet on campus that feels safe before or after class. Having a place that is safe may help a student attend class more regularly and help lessen the effects of anxiety and avert stresses that can exacerbate other psychiatric symptoms. So this is kind of talking about, just finding places on campus that you feel or the person with disabilities feels at peace is another way to kind of think about it. Somewhere that they feel comfortable. I kind of had a few spots that I felt comfortable before or after class. One of those was right outside my English professor's office before our class. And by doing that, I had a little more help the second time I took English. And so it's kind of just those places that someone feels like this is a good environment for me. And so it's somewhere that they can go to before class or after class while they're waiting for their next class to begin. All right, so we've kind of wrapped up the self-advocacy within the college academic environment. So now we're going to switch and briefly talk about advocating within the workforce environment. So when you're advocating within the workforce environment, one of the most important things is you need to know when and how much to disclose about your disability. Because if you disclose too much too soon, then it could kind of make the employer not consider you for the position. Understand your rights as well as the limits of protection under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And this one, I believe, is hyperlinked. So this is kind of when you need to understand the term undue hardship. And the ADA talks about that employers are required to provide people with legitimate disabilities accommodations in order to perform the job. The important thing to take away is the term undue hardship, which means if the employer can prove that any accommodation that would be implemented would be too high of a cost, or within some other way cause too like if there were essential functions that you couldn't do. Because the other thing the Americans with Disabilities Act states is that employers do not have to, as a reasonable accommodation, remove essential job functions. So if you're unable to perform essential job functions, your employer could potentially list that reason as an undue hardship, because it is a requirement they require for everyone in this position. And if there are no accommodations that would help you meet that essential job function, then they can claim undue hardship. Or if your accommodation would cost them too much money, then they can claim undue hardship. For example, I've had this happen once. I apply to work for a particular employer. I kind of will respect their privacy by not mentioning the organization. But I applied to work as a caregiver for a group home of those with special needs. And I had been selected and they started their onboarding process. However, because of my leg braces, I'm unable to squat and bend the way that they require, and to lift patients at the event that we needed to do that. And I tried the accommodation route and explained to them that, just because I can't fully squat does not mean that I cannot lift the requirement, which was 55 pounds, safely. And we went through the accommodations process, and it was kind of determined because I'd be a high risk to the safety of clients as well as potentially myself. Trying to provide me the accommodation of allowing me to lift in the way my braces supported me would fall under undue hardship for them. So hopefully that makes sense. Know about the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and when to reach out to them. I can tell you about this commission. The first thing they're going to ask you is, have you tried to solve the issue with the employer? And if your answer is no, they're going to expect you to try that first, unless there's just some kind of situation that's an extremely gross violation. Be prepared to provide medical necessity documentation from your doctor for any accommodation request. Potential accommodations on the job. Modified schedule, leave, assistive technology, job coach, training, job restructuring. So for modified schedule, it's being able to accommodate, like maybe for medical reasons, you can only work part-time. That would be one example. For leave, an example would be being allowed to use paid time off for medical appointment, or using unpaid time off for a medical appointment. Assistive technology, one example would be maybe you need Dragon software, the text-to-speech software on your work computer. That would be an example of assistive technology. For job coaches are people that they help you find employment opportunities as well as there can, if need be, be the middle person and help you communicate with your boss and help support your boss support you, as well as teach you how to build a resume or job skills. They can also come to the job and help with your training. And then, of course, with the training, one accommodation could be extra time in order to learn certain skills or tasks. And then job restructuring would be, maybe, for example, you work at McDonald's and you can't stand for long periods of time. So having a stool to sit on instead of being expected to stand the whole time would kind of be job restructuring, because it's a change to your environment that not everyone else has. And these are my resources that I used. Jan's searchable online accommodation resource. You can go into there, you can type like ADHD and it'll pull up different accommodations or lifting. So it's a way for you to search and find out potential reasonable accommodations for different situations. And then the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and then TWC Vocational Rehabilitation Services. That is for people with disabilities, and it helps those people that are interested in seeking employment, and depending on what you qualify for with them, they could provide you a job coach. They could provide you assistive technology like the Dragon software. It just really depends on your case and what services they deem you eligible for. So that's kind of my presentation today. Are there any questions?
Hey, Jordan, this is Greg. Great presentation, very informative. Thank you so much. I know that there was at least one question submitted in the Q&A. However, I can't see it because I lost my internet connection, so it went away for me in the Q&A box. Can you see it in there?
Yes, I got it. My thoughts on reasonable accommodations for online classes. It can be, and that's simply because you could take it at home, and therefore, depending on what your needs are, they could say that you're at home, and so you have access to your books, and they like, for example, they can't say that you wouldn't use your textbook on an exam, so that might make it a little harder to get extended time on an exam. You came in, I wonder if the procession. Yes. If you want the recording, it'll be on NAMI Texas website. And if you would like my PowerPoint, if you go back to the beginning of the presentation, once it's posted, I listed my work email because I also work as a peer support specialist for peerhopes.com, which is an online peer support provider for individuals interested in receiving peer support. We do not bill insurance at all. It is only self-pay, just so y'all know about my job. So you have to pay out of pocket. What link could we use to find the resources? I think that's in the chat. So if you go back to the end of my presentation, when it's posted, the links are listed. and then you could be able to type them in, or again, if you want to email me, I can send you the links, Gloria. I think there's another question.
Okay.
Because it's in the chat box instead of the Q&A. Doctoral student of occupational creating, specifically food. Oh, yes. And Valerie Sanderson, I am copying your email address right now. Oops, not select all.
There is now one more.
Yeah, I saw that right as I was copying Valerie's information. Actually, I'm going to take a quick picture on my phone to make sure I have that email address.
Yeah, I have Valerie's info too. I can make sure to pass that along.
Yeah, if you will pass it along to me, that would be quicker. Do you know if there's accommodation for TSI tests for college admissions requirements? I would think there should be, but the best person to talk with would be disability support services for the particular college you would take that test at, or whoever the provider of the TSI test is. Speak with them. They would know the direct answer to that, Amanda. But my guess would be yes, and there should be, but I don't want to give you one answer and then you think, and then it turns out it's not true. So I want to say yes, but I would highly recommend reaching out either to the Disability Support Services office for the particular college or whoever the provider is for the test, and ask them. Any other questions? Because it's like I'm checking the chat just to kind of make sure. But again, if you have any questions that you didn't type or I haven't gotten to, my link, or not my link, my email is on the very first slide of this presentation. And once it's posted, you can go back and you have my email.
Jordan, great job. People clearly found this very informative. And this is going to reach more people than just those who are here live, because we're going to send the recording out far and wide, including to the full NAMI Texas email distribution list. Yes. Donna, can you add your email to the chat for us? Jordan, can you type that in there for her?
Yes, I am right now.
And in the meantime, everyone, thank you all so much for joining. We have our next webinar on the night before Veterans Day. So we're having the webinar on Tuesday, November 10th at 6 p.m. Central. And the focus of that webinar will be on bipolar disorder and veterans' mental health. Please join us for that. You can find more information at namitexas.org/webinars. And also I will plug our November 7th event. This is our big event for the year. We'll be giving out awards, doing our annual business meeting, giving a public policy update, and we'll be hearing from the CEO of Haven for Hope in San Antonio. Just visit namitexas.org and you'll find all the information you need for that. With that, I want to thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate all your support. And we appreciate your participation. We want to provide resources and education and information to all Texans who might benefit from it or be interested in it. We aim to cover a broad range of subjects, and Jordan has just provided us with a very valuable, very comprehensive presentation on advocating for accommodations within the college academic environment and the workplace. So Jordan, thank you for covering this for us. This is going to help a lot of people.
No problem. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you again soon.